The Mexican desert, some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. This was the training ground of the Aztecs, a nation of warriors. In the desert, they learned that the gods had no mercy. But they survived every hardship to claim a destiny of great riches and power. At its height in the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. They considered themselves chosen people, chosen by trials in the desert to conquer and to rule. But their prophets and their terrible travels in the desert taught them that nothing lasts forever. With uncanny accuracy, they foretold the one thing they feared the most: the cataclysmic end of their own empire.
Major funding for Spirits of the Jaguar is provided by Park Foundation, dedicated to education and quality television. Major corporate support is made possible by Canon, providing the power of imaging to express your visions at home and at work. And by Ford, maker of Ford Expedition, the full-size sport utility that can seat up to 9 and can tow up to 8,000 pounds. The new Ford Expedition, the only way to get there. This program is also made possible by annual financial support from viewers like you.
The Aztecs believed that the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico were the birthplace of the world. The gods gathered there in darkness when yet no sun had shone and no dawn had broken. 4 times before, they had created and destroyed an imperfect world. Now they held council. Who will dare enter the flames to become the sun, to bring the dawn of the 5th world? The gods feared the flames. Only the diseased and humble Nanhuatzin had the courage to step forward. The spirit Jaguar followed him through the cosmic fire and gained its spots, and the spirit eagle its black wingtips. They became the most sacred of animals. The 5th world had been created. The last civilization to emerge in Mexico was thirsty for blood. The sacrifice the gods made to create the world left a debt. Humans had to pay it back with sacrifice and war. The Aztecs' reign of blood and splendor was destroyed by conquerors from Spain less than 500 years ago. But their history survives. This is the story of the origins of these people and the forces that created their cult of death. Aztec history speaks of an ancestral home, Aztlan, a lake somewhere in northern Mexico, land of the white heron, land of the Aztecs. Their stories describe how nearly 900 years ago, the gods of these lakeside people decreed that they must leave. Go and seek out the cactus upon which an eagle stands in his joy. It is there that we shall fix ourselves. It is there that we shall rule, that we shall meet the other nations, and that with our weapons we shall overthrow them. Our city shall be there. The Aztecs recorded their migration in a series of drawings. They describe a journey, partly mythical, partly real, full of mishap and adventure. The Aztecs lived as nomads in a land that was both barren and hostile. Even the birds of prey that scan these harsh canyons find barely enough to survive. The Aztecs wandered in the wilderness for 200 years to find their promised land. They were tested to the limit for 10 generations. They saw themselves as a chosen people, invincible and indestructible. The sight of a full-sized eagle on a cactus would be truly remarkable. The smaller and lighter Harris hawk is more likely the bird that inspired Aztec myth. The Aztecs were following a prophecy in which the natural world would reveal to them the place of their own destiny. Humans and animals were actors in the same drama. Survival here depends on cooperation. Hawks and eagles normally hunt alone, but Harris hawks work together. They set out at dawn on a shared hunt. A ground squirrel is their prey. Most unique in birds of prey, maximizes the chances of flushing out the squirrel. This was a harsh land, and finding enough to eat was difficult for all the residents, especially if they had families to feed. This Gila woodpecker has found an insect grub for its youngsters, hidden safely inside a cactus. The Aztecs had to hunt wildlife that other people regarded as vermin. This was a dangerous place to call home. Plants defend themselves with spines, the animals with poisons. Rattlesnakes thrived here. One wrong step could cost someone their life. But the Aztecs learned to hunt these creatures for food. They had little choice. The secret is to handle the snake confidently, grabbing the head with its poisonous fangs in a firm grip. But rattlesnakes also had another significance to the Aztecs. 3 or 4 times a year, they shed their skins to enable them to grow. Snakeskin cannot expand once it is hardened, so the rattlesnake has to constantly discard its outer layer in favor of fresh, supple skin. To the Aztecs, this process endowed the snake with special properties. It was the living sign of rebirth and transformation. The gods were responsible for another transformation that affected every living thing in the desert. For a brief moment in time, they would change this barren wilderness into a garden of plenty. If the powerful gods willed it, they would send rains, and when the rain stopped, there was a sweet harvest. For both wildlife and people, this is a time of abundance. The fruits of the prickly pear are delicious, swollen with water after the rains. The bright colors of the cactus fruit advertise that the fruit is ripe and the seeds mature, ready for dispersal. The seeds pass undamaged through the bodies of both people and birds and are dispersed across the desert. The fresh young cactus pads are also edible, but harder work and not as tasty. Another group of desert plants, the agaves or century plants, provided the Aztecs with an incredible range of products: clothing, roofing, food, and drink. The trick is to keep scraping away at an open wound in the center of the plant where the flower stem would have been. The sugary water that would have fed the flower can either be drunk right away as honey water or left to ferment to become pulque, the alcoholic drink of the Aztecs. Tequila is distilled agave juice. Agaves flower just once in their lifetime. Their strategy is to spend years storing reserves of sugar and water, and then, in one huge burst of reproduction, produce all their flowers at the same time. This is the only moment when an agave can produce another generation. With only one chance to bloom and reproduce, agaves work hard to attract creatures to pollinate their flowers. The thick, fleshy leaves of the agave plant provided the Aztecs with fibers for spinning. In a wilderness without wool or leather, the agave was all of these, and rope and paper too. Once the thick outer cuticle is removed, the fine fibers inside can be spun into thread. From this, they made their garments and a fiber related to sisal. The filmy outer layer of the agave leaf provided a kind of parchment that could be used for writing. The Aztecs developed a reputation for resourcefulness, endurance, and strength in a hard land. And it wasn't only cactus they cut into, and agaves whose hearts they cut out. This is a sacrificial victim impaled on a barrel cactus, having his heart removed. The gods had to be appeased, and they often were. Unable to withstand the heat of the day, many of the desert plants flower in the cool of the night. The delicate blooms of the giant cacti last only a few hours. The cacti offer themselves to their most important nocturnal pollinator, the bat. The agave, during its single-shotted reproduction, is open all hours, so it attracts bats of the night as well as birds of the day. Its anthers and stamens are presented high above the flowers to ensure maximum contact with the bat's body. The Aztecs believed that the night belonged to the spirit world. People could enter that world through the help of plants and animals. Secretions produced on the skin of toads or in the sap of plants are a defense against predators. To the Aztecs, they were gateways to the realm of the spirits. The sacred cactus, the peyote, produces a chemical which in nature helps prevent it from being eaten. But it was eaten by the Aztecs with dramatic effects. A single peyote button, less than a mouthful, can result in a trance which may last for days. The plant takes over complete control of the senses. First, the body becomes numb. Then the drug produces vivid and powerful visions. The Aztecs had more than 1,000 gods. There were gods of fire, rain, agriculture, even of the pulque drink. In the basalt rock, they carved representations of the animal spirits. The gods created the world. They could also destroy it. They represented birth, death, and rebirth. Many were decorated with snakes and skulls. After 60 years in the wilderness, the Aztecs' migration south brought them into contact with the established civilizations of central Mexico. The Toltecs had dominated this land for 400 years, but the arrival of the Aztecs marked their decline. We shall never know exactly what happened, but shortly after the arrival of the desert tribes, the Toltec civilization was extinguished. All that remained were the stone Toltec warriors, now powerless to defend their land. The Toltecs were cosmologists, mathematicians, and artists with the discipline of military power. The Aztecs spoke of them as their own mentors, and the Toltecs' bloody sacrifices became the inspiration for Aztec ritual. The Aztecs were aware that other great civilizations had been and gone before. They had discovered the great city of Teotihuacan, a vast complex of pyramids and temples with nobody there. The people that once worshipped here had disappeared some 500 years before the Aztecs arrived. Aztec mythology was now built around this mysterious, deserted city. These temples, the Aztecs reasoned, must have been the meeting place of the gods. Here, the fifth world was created. The Aztecs continued south into a land dominated by volcanoes. They entered the high plateau called the Valley of Mexico. The awesome power of the gods constantly threatened the people below. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions reminded the Aztecs that the gods controlled this world. Here on the slopes of the volcanoes, the Aztecs encountered animals and plants very different from those of the desert they left behind. The mountain lion, or puma, has an extensive range, but is most often found near deer, its favorite prey. This land was once the home of brown bears. Unlike the deserts, here there were streams of icy water from the cold peaks and delicate orchids in the oak forests. In these rich forests, tropical and temperate plants and animals lived side by side. Here there were hummingbirds and parrots living in forests of oak and pine. The thick-billed parrot uses its strong beak to slice open pine cones and feast on the seeds. And it had plenty of cones to choose from. There were more than 50 species of pine in these great forests. In Aztec times, these forests covered much of the Valley of Mexico, and at their base were giant lakes fed by mountain streams and visited by millions of migrant birds. In 1311, they were visited by the Aztecs. After 2 centuries, they had found their promised land. Here on Lake Texcoco, it is said the prophecy was completed. The eagle landed on the cactus. The pelican is one of more than 50 species of water birds that migrate here for the winter. The shallow waters of these once vast lakes provided a bounty of food for wading birds escaping the northern cold. This was a great place to spend the winter. The weather was warm, the lake a smorgasbord of insects, mollusks, fish, algae, and crustacea. This avocet couple has just started a family. They take turns incubating their eggs, which hatch after 3 weeks. The changing of the guard occurs about every 20 minutes. The avocet's oddly shaped beak is adapted to skimming food particles out of the water and mud. The lake's rich supply of food attracted birds and people. When the Aztecs arrived, the shores were already densely populated by hostile tribes. But there was one place that was uninhabited, a small, boggy, snake-infested island, the last place on Earth anyone would choose to live. The Aztecs chose it. There they built Tenochtitlan, one of the most spectacular cities on Earth, the Venice of the Americas. Over the years, they dredged the shallow water to extend their island. They built canals for drainage and transport, and a vast system of fields. It took less than 100 years to build this city on the lake. The only domesticated animal was the dog. There were no horses, mules, or oxen. No need, in fact, for the wheel. Instead, the Aztecs relied on boats and manpower. The city grew tremendously. The Aztecs had finally found a place where they could live and prosper. It became the capital of the new empire. The Aztecs thrived here because they harvested everything they could from the lake, including the bird life, an important source of protein. The birds of their new home, like those of the desert they left behind, were also integrated into their beliefs and understanding of the natural world. Ruddy ducks beginning to engage in mating behavior signaled to the Aztecs that the wet season would soon be on its way. These ducks breed just before the rains. In the battle for the opposite sex, the males engage in ritualized displays, used to warn off rivals and attract a mate. But the expanding human population could not live on the resources of the lake alone. They built farms on the lake, using the nutrient-rich mud from the lake bottom, the ideal base for growing crops. This muddy foundation made for a wet and well-fertilized floating garden. Their farming was incredibly successful. They had no need for slash-and-burn agriculture, where new land is cleared every few years. These rich, muddy waters enable them to farm continuously, year in, year out. These were some of the most productive fields in the world. The Aztecs grew a wide variety of crops: beans, squash, chili peppers, tomatoes, amaranth, and most importantly, maize. It was used to make tortillas or steamed tamales. It was also processed into a liquid and consumed as a gruel or a drink. Some animals, like these grackles, also enjoyed the Aztecs' bountiful harvests, taking advantage of their agricultural skills. These pests invaded the fields, partaking of their own maize feast. The Aztecs learned to exploit every aspect of the lake's resources, obtaining food from every link in the food chain. They even collected algae, which was processed into cakes. They also harvested the lake's tiny water insects and their eggs. Both the insects themselves and their eggs were considered delicacies. The Aztecs were insect farmers. They planted long-stemmed grasses in the shallow water, providing a place for the adults to lay their eggs. The grasses would then be collected and the eggs stripped from the stems. Millions of eggs were harvested and cooked up, a protein-packed addition to the Aztec diet. The Aztecs did have some competition on their island, but it did not come from human beings. Raccoons are common lakeside residents. They feed on anything they can get their paws on. They raided the Aztecs' food supply, which included the fish in the canals. The Aztecs gave each animal a name and a character. The raccoon was known as Mapachli, the bandit, the thief. There is a record of how the Aztecs felt about Mapachli in their own words. It was called Mapachli because its hands are quite like our hands. Likewise, its feet are quite like our feet. Sometimes it goes upright when it walks. And since it is a great thief, since it takes anything that it sees, and since it has human hands, a thief is also called Mapachli. The Aztecs flourished and multiplied. By the early 1500s, this city on a lake supported a population of some 300,000 people, 4 times larger than the contemporary London of Henry VIII. Today, Mexico City stands on this same site. But the Aztecs had plans for an empire stretching far beyond this city and this lake. Their conviction that they were a chosen people gave them a truly imperial vision to benefit other people by conquering them. Their most respected warriors were knights of the Jaguar and Eagle, who shared the courageous spirit of the animals that entered the fire at the dawn of the Fifth World. These warriors had no fear of death. Death in war was not final. The spirits of the dead could visit this world as animals. Those that died in war would appear as butterflies. Each year, millions of monarch butterflies migrate to Mexico from North America. The Aztecs saw themselves surrounded by the souls of countless heroes, wearing images of their feathered war dress, celebrating their own triumphs and the victories of the living. In the early spring, as the temperatures rise, the butterflies begin to mate. Some 200 million butterflies overwinter in Mexico to avoid the northern cold. But even here, the temperatures sometimes fall below freezing. When it does, death is everywhere. For the Aztecs, the purpose of war was not simply to slay the enemy. It was a ritualized rather than bloody battle. The skill of the warrior was judged not by his ability to kill, but by his ability to take captives unmarked, in perfect condition. These were the most valuable offerings. The earth goddess was especially greedy and pitiless. Every night she devoured the sun. Only the offering of that precious liquid, human blood, would persuade her to release it back into the sky. At the inauguration of a new temple on the lake in 1487, thousands of prisoners were sacrificed. The killings continued for 4 days. By the year 1502, the bloody empire of the Aztecs extended from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. So intimidating were these people that the maintenance of their empire required no garrisons or occupying forces. The threat of war was sufficient to keep tribute pouring in from the distant corners of the empire. Aztec emperors were brought exotic offerings from far-off supplicants. The coral reefs of Mexico's Atlantic coast provided them with riches that were unthinkable during the years of their wandering in the desert. The emperor Moctezuma demanded fresh fish. A relay of runners carried them some 200 miles back to his camp. Apparently, they did so within a single day. The products of the reef also had a religious significance. Inside the temples, sacrifices were made to ensure fertility. They included shells, fish, coral, as well as the most sacred of animals, the eagle and the jaguar. The Aztecs traded with and exacted tribute from a whole range of people scattered across the different regions of Mexico. The rainforest contained special riches. It supplied one of the Aztecs' most precious commodities, feathers. The Aztecs called their most valued feather work the shadows of the most sacred ones. The shining beauty and rich colors of feathers were seen as fragments of the light, color, and delicacy of the world of the gods. Their lust for feathers may even have been the driving force for the expansion of their empire. The Aztec feather traders ranged throughout Central America. Guatemala is an Aztec word. From here, they would have collected the feathers of birds such as the scarlet macaw. The characteristic call and eye-catching display of Moctezuma's Ora Pendula rings through the canopy. The brilliant yellow tail feathers were highly valued by Aztec craftsmen. But the raiding parties on the Oropingula's nest were not only human. This cowbird is watching carefully for the chance to place its own egg in an Oropingula's nest. The Oropingula usually lays 2 or more eggs. If the cowbird can find a nest with just 1 egg inside, she stands a good chance of fooling the Oropingula by adding one of her own. These hanging basket nests give enough privacy for the sneak to lay her egg in secrecy. The cowbird's egg has been laid, but this time at least, the Oropingula realizes what has happened and takes it away. From the cloud forests of the tropical mountains, the Aztecs collected the feathers of the most precious bird of all, the quetzal. The emperor's headdress contained the tail feathers of hundreds of these birds. More than 10,000 quetzals were caught each year. From the deserts far to the north of Mexico came a mineral of great value, turquoise. It decorated their representations of the gods. Gold was important too. It was the color of the sun. 2 tons of gold were collected each year in tribute. In a world of uncertainty, here was a metal that would not tarnish or fade. The prisoners of war provided the most valuable tribute of all. We will never know how many died in homage to the gods, but tens of thousands must have perished. The horror of the Aztec skull racks greeted the first Europeans. Today they can still be found in the center of Mexico City. In the central square, street performers recreate Aztec dances for tourists, where once bloody rituals were enacted. No eagle flies here now, no cactus grows for his perch. And even the sky has changed. An acid rain is washing away the stone traces which the Aztecs left behind. The Aztec Empire did not decay. It was abruptly demolished. The Aztec calendar predicted the return of a fair-skinned god, Quetzalcoatl, in the year 1 Reed. We call that year 1519. A comet in the sky, a great tongue of fire, foretold the arrival of this god from the east. But this was no god. Spaniards, led by Cortez, had arrived in search of gold. We saw them come in battle array as conquerors, and the dust rose in whirlwinds on the roads. Their spears glinted in the sun, their pennants fluttered like bats. Some of them were dressed in glittering metal from head to foot. Tame deer carried them wherever they wished to go, holding them as high as the roof of a house. And their war dogs, savage, like demons. The Spanish made war in a new way. They did not seek prisoners. They had no interest in sacrifice, just elimination. They joined forces with the enemies of the Aztecs. In 1519, there were 20 million Native Americans in Mexico. By 1608, only 1 million remained alive. Disease brought by the Spanish eventually killed far more than war. The Spanish conquest brought about the fusion of Catholicism and indigenous beliefs. Much has changed, but many Mexicans still hold a traditional attitude to death. On the first and second day of November, the churchyards become a place of celebration, full of flowers and food. On this Day of the Dead, the souls of the deceased visit friends and relatives on earth to share in the pleasures of the living. The skull is not simply a macabre decoration. It represents the worship of death and the promise of resurrection. With the demise of the Aztecs, much of the world ruled by the spirits of the Jaguar has vanished. But in certain places and at certain times, that spirit can still be glimpsed. The wildlife and the cultures of Central America were both shaped by this extraordinary land. The original civilizations have gone, but the creatures, and at times the spirits, remain.
To find out more about nature, visit us on the PBS homepage at the address on your screen. Major funding for Spirits of the Jaguar is provided by Park Foundation, dedicated to education and quality television. Major corporate support is made possible by Canon, providing the power of imaging to express your visions at home and at work. And by Ford, maker of the 1997 Taurus, the sedan that's giving America more of what it wants in an automobile: room, power, and performance. Ford Taurus. This program is also made possible by annual financial support from viewers like you.
Spirits of the Jaguar is available on home video cassette for $19.95 per episode or $69.95 for the 4-part set plus shipping. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Please specify episode title.
This is PBS.